Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm hoping that you can all see and hear me. A very warm welcome to this afternoon's webinar on regional and minority languages, which is a collaboration this afternoon between CENEL and NAPL, first time. I'm Rowley Keating. In my day job, I'm Chief Executive at the British Library, but I'm also chair of CENL, CENEL, the Conference of European National Librarians. And it's wonderful to be partnering this afternoon for the first time on our webinar with our friends at NAPL, the National Authorities on Public Libraries of Europe Forum. CENEL, for those of you who don't know, brings together national librarians and their teams from right across the European continent, some 48 different institutions in 45 countries. And we come together in different ways, online and once upon a time in real life as well. And we hope again in the future to share ideas, to work together, and to grow the impact and understanding of what it is that libraries do, and in our case, particularly national libraries. A big theme of that is about skills and knowledge exchange in different ways. And to that end, we've begun recently launching a series of webinars like this to explore different themes. The first one, some of you may have been at, was back in December last year, and it was on the theme of diversity and inclusion in national libraries. We touched on lots of topics, but one of the themes we began to explore was the role of minority languages in collections and in institutions. So that's a perfect bridge, really, and a very natural bridge to this afternoon's session. We're also very, very keen as an organization to build bridges and break down boundaries between different kinds of library. And so it's particularly nice to be able to work with NAPL to bring the National Library community and the public library communities of Europe together. So it's my pleasure to hand over to your actual chair for this afternoon, who I'm sure many of you will know anyway from his work at IFLA for many years, more recently at Qatar National Library, and now of course in Ireland as head of libraries development in the Republic of Ireland. Let me hand over please to the current president of NAPL, Stuart Hamilton. Stuart.
Thanks, Rowley, and thanks to the team at the British Library and also to CENEL for helping us set up this afternoon's webinar. It falls to me to give a little bit of an introduction. As Rowley said, I'm Stuart Hamilton. I'm the head of libraries development at the local government management agency in Ireland, where we oversee the country's national public library strategy. And I'm also presently the president of NAPL, which is the National Authorities on Public Libraries in Europe. And we have members in 23 different countries all across kind of big Europe, Council of Europe. And our members are the bodies that support and coordinate the activities of public libraries at national levels. So our membership is a mix of different sort of government ministries, library associations, national or state agencies, and in the case of 6 of our members, national libraries themselves. We promote principles, strategies for public library policy, and we share best practice, and we seek together to understand the sort of forces at play in public library development. And we do all of this so that we can provide better services, overcome challenges, and improve what we offer to library users across Europe. And of course, in this way, we're very similar to CENEL and the role that CENEL plays with national libraries. So we're very, very happy to be partnering on this webinar this afternoon. Both of our organisations have that piece in common, which Rowley mentioned, which is international knowledge exchange, which is so important to libraries. Throughout the COVID crisis, NAPL members have been meeting regularly to share information and to understand different approaches to the pandemic. But in a more general sense, my entire career tells me that learning from colleagues in other countries is a characteristic of highly successful library leaders. So I congratulate you all for attending this webinar this afternoon. And of course, there's something new to learn all the time, and libraries and their role in keeping small and minority languages alive is just one example. I will admit that this is not a topic that I was super familiar with before I began working with NAPL. And Elizabeth, who you will hear from later on, as a NAPL member, recognised a pretty urgent need for a focus on this subject as we travel through a changing time in European history. And she shared with NAPL colleagues the role that libraries can play. NAPL now has a working group which is focused on what libraries can do to protect and promote smaller minority languages. Not the languages that have arrived through migration happening during the last century, although of course these are very important and libraries have a role to play, but the languages that are addressed through the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, the ECRML, which means historical, regional and minority languages in Europe as classified by the nation state that signed that charter. These are languages that we'll hear about this afternoon that may have a long history. They may be indigenous, but maybe haven't been recognized as such, or they may even have moved from place to place throughout history in Europe and don't have a claim to a single territory. If, like NAPL, you believe that a diversified Europe with lots of languages, cultural expressions and traditions is a great defense against discrimination and nationalism, then we must ask what role libraries can play in keeping small languages alive through our work. We can defend languages, but we can also be on the front foot too. And NAPL believes that if libraries can actually increase knowledge about the diverse history of Europe with all its different peoples, cultures, and languages, then we're doing our part to make it easier to accept new people and new languages into the European family. So let's hear how this is being done. Our three speakers this afternoon all bring different stories and viewpoints on the issue. From Slovenia, we will learn about the important work to preserve Italian language in the area of Koper Capodistria, close to the Italian border. Our presentation from Estonia will discuss the protection of the Estonian language in an environment where the effects of Russian suppression are still being felt on it. And our third case study is from Sweden, where the government appointed the National Library a commission to reinforce and develop services for national minorities and the indigenous Sami people. Now, before we begin, we have the inevitable piece of housekeeping. A closed captioning option is available for those who wish it. It should be visible to you down the bottom in Zoom, and I think it's referenced in the chat already. We're going to be taking questions through the Q&A function, which you can also find at the bottom of the screen. And if you have a question for a specific presenter, I'm going to try to ask it once they've finished their presentation so that we can keep things flowing and relevant. But we will have time for questions and answers at the end for all the panelists. And I've already encouraged the panelists themselves to listen carefully to each other and to have questions of their own. I'd encourage you to use the chat function for general observations. This is a great way of actually sharing maybe what your library is doing or other projects that you want to share of relevance to the topic at hand. Okay, so look, full biographies of our speakers are available on the event page, but our first speaker is Aleksandro Bura from the Central Library in Koper Capodistria in Slovenia. Aleksandro has a PhD in international sociology, and his studies and work have focused on preserving minority culture and language. Now, he works with schools and youth population to preserve and promote the rich material and immaterial culture heritage of his region, and he's going to be speaking about this today. So, Aleksandro, the floor is yours.
Do you hear me?
We do.
Okay. Thank you so much for the word. Good afternoon to you all. This is the title of my speech for today. So, the role of public libraries in helping children improve minority regional language. First of all, I would like to, before starting my speech, I would like to share a photo of Professor Ofelia Garcia that says, linguistic heterogeneity is like a colorful flower garden, adding beauty, but also complexity, and needing a plan and work in order to conserve its beauty. I mean that library can play an important role, not in planning, because this requires a particular specific skill, but more in doing something, in working together with other institutions to preserve linguistic diversity. I would like to show you when I come from. I come from Slovenia. My country is Koper Capodistria, as mentioned before, is in west-south part of Slovenia by the sea. So today I would like, I'm going to briefly introduce the Slovenian legislative system for minority protection focused on Italian minority. I will describe shortly the legislative support for public libraries in ethnically mixed area. I will look at what our public library in Koper is doing for minority language children. And then in the end, I will propose some activity to improve minority language support for children. Following the disintegration of Yugoslavia in 1991, Slovenia was previously Yugoslavia. Slovenia succeeded in bilateral agreements in respect of the protection of Italian minority, which were concluded before with Italy. One important aspect of this bilateral international regulation is that within the framework of the state internal law guarantee an equal level of protection of the member of minority. The starting point is that for sure is defined directly in the Constitution of the Republic of Slovenia. By the notion of ethnically mixed area. This is an area that is historically settled down by national communities. And there is a series of collective rights linked to them. The rights to use the language in public or in private life, etc., etc., recognized by the state, regardless of the number of the portion of the speaker of regional minority language in ethnically mixed territory. In those municipalities or part of them where there are free recognized minority reside, Slovenia recognized three minorities. One is Italian, Hungarian, and then Romani. In the so-called mixed, ethnical mixed area, Italian and Hungarian are also official languages. The settlement area of the Italian-speaking community comprises the ethnically mixed area in four municipalities. In what I can show you before is the Slovene, called Slovene Istria, is our region. The provision of the law regarding Italian language are implementing in the acts regulating the field of education and many other things, judiciary, administrative bodies, and also social life and cross-border exchanges. The implementation, this is so important, is of the law is mostly, it has to be pointed out, that's also an important thing, that the implementation of language rights of national minorities directly concerns also the members of the majority nation, always in ethnically mixed area. The members of the majority are required to have bilingual documents and also to learn minority language at school. The Republic of Slovenia has included cultural heritage and cultural creation of the national community in their cultural heritage of the Slovene state. This is also valid for library material in minority language and protect them in the similar way as the cultural production of the majority nation. The provision concerning the cultural area of national community and specifically regarding libraries can be found in the Librarianship Act. In this act, general libraries in ethnically mixed area provide services and activities for members of the Italian, also Hungarian, and the other minority that I mentioned before in their languages. In general, public libraries formulate the program or in general, public library formulate the program, yes, of activity in agreement with a representative of the national communities. If we go on, the main library in the Slovene Istria, responsible for the acquisition of library material, is the public library Srečko Vilhar. The library has an important department for the Italian language and literature. The largest part of the activities for members of the Italian community is carried out by this department that is responsible also for all library and information need for the members of local member of Italian community in Koper. The Department of Italian is also committed to coordinate library activities, also for school of the Italian community in the coastal region. The Department for Young Readers has important due. With the support of the Department of the Italian Language and Literature, performs many activities in Italian language for garden to school. It is worth to stress that activities are open for all the children of the ethnically mixed area, independently if they are Slovene or Italian or the other countries they come from. Overall, there are 5 types of activities that the Department for Young Readers carries out for children. The first, pedagogical hours for children, when colleagues educate children to attend the library with many workshops focused on different contents agreed previously with teachers. Then there is the hours of fairy tales following by workshops. And then more hours dedicated to Italian language. Here it's important to stress that are for Slovene children at the level of kindergarten, from kindergarten to elementary school, divided also by ages, with a lot of audiovisual material, exercise and games in order to promote the interest to them to learn Italian language. It's also available for English language too. Then visit kindergarten, where colleagues dramatized one fairy tale directly at kindergarten. They make like a small theater with its scenography and music. So the second point was more or less, it's a little different activity, fairy tales, hours followed by groups, it doesn't matter. Ending with a night in the library, which has a really rich reading and cultural program for children, and I have to say also a sleepless night for many of my colleagues. Going on, now I'm going to present 3 activities that, in my opinion, are useful, are important also to be included to improve minority language support for children library. As we can easily see, there are many activities that are carried out by the Department of Youngers. So, I propose these activities. My perspective is certainly taken into consideration that I have been for many years a teacher of social sciences in a secondary minority schools. So, firstly, I would like to say that it's desirable to work even more closely with schools in deciding content that are also friendly to children with special needs. Secondly, it is also important to complement textbooks of history, for example, with adapted material, especially in the field of history, as I mentioned before, and also of local cultural history and other things that are similar to that. As an example of good practice on how library can give great scope is the special application Grisoni, that read them from an ancient noble family in Koper, which was designed in the library for visitors of the towns and especially for the youth. And it is adaptable also for children with the special need, I mean visually impaired children. Through the application Grisoni, we can make a stroll, taking a walk around the city, and we can discover interesting story hidden in the past. An experience that has the possibility also to be enriched in contents and way to be interacted by the users. In this way, we would also fill, that's a very important field, the large gaps that exist in school curricula where local history is still poorly represented. We have the possibility to learn many things on national story about Italy, national story about Slovenia, but less on local local history. The second propose, I named this proposed adapted Sneakers and Leather. That will be a sort of it's a sort of gap that's well known in British countries. But here we adapted a little bit just to discover local culture and heritage. I know that history and language matters, Italian, Slovene, or the other languages are many times considered bold, daring, boring, and demotivating by children. and also by students too. Probably this is because the learning process is disconnected from from the reality and experience of that children. One possible way to overcome this state of matter is to create specific table games in both languages in cooperation with school. Basically, we can also use the game I mentioned before, Snake and Ladders, and then as a starting point, and then enrich it with many questions regarding various fields of local culture and heritage, and then create also, that is important, an online version. The last proposal is a workshop that the children can work with authentic writing historical sources. In the library, of course, we have a lot, we have a lot of old books starting from 16th century ahead. But also we had the possibility to select from them some text regarding different topics and make available copies that can be adapted, for sure, translating from Latin to Slovenian, from Latin to Italian, or vice versa. Depending on the children, this is depending on children's age, also the simplification of the text. We can simplify text for different ages. By actively investigating and selecting material from the past, with a list of previously prepared questions, rather than passively listening facts about the past, children strengthen their critical reading and writing skill and improve their ability to handle and retain vital contents information in a scientific way, using the same method as historians do. They also develop a sense of culture and ownership of knowledge they assemble that foster genuine and lasting interest in the cultural heritage. That's the goal, this lasting interest in the cultural heritage. In the conclusion, I will, these are the application Grisoni on your right, on the left, the game Snakers and Ladders. In the end, the conclusion, as we can easily understand, all the proposals I made here are nothing new at all. Are simply the didactic approach of social science is simply adapted to the library. Another step forward will be for sure in fostering the use of available ICT tools. All the content should be present and available on a platform on the net at any time, and also to groups and individuals invited to the library. In this way, we will overcome a sort of lack of interest that something has library in children. So I think that that's all for me. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm happy to answer any question you might have. Also, I'm open to your suggestion and proposal.
Thanks, Alessandro. In the chat at the moment, we don't have any questions, but I would obviously encourage everybody that we can take those directly for Alessandro at the end as well. Then we may actually have a question. Let's have a quick look. Alessandro, you can access the questions as well there. You can probably read that one. I just want to make sure that you're getting it right. The question for everybody else is a really intriguing PowerPoint. It's from Arjun Sanyal. Arjun, I think you're actually, I'm not sure, but I think you're in from India, because I think we had some contact this morning. Yeah, do you ever experiment with different pedagogical techniques using ICT for promoting learning activities in regional languages?
Oh, yeah, I'm starting to do something, but I'm at the beginning. I'm in the beginning, so I will, as I told you before, I would like to, if there are some suggestions, some way to use better ICT tools, it would be a great thing. And the great thing also in this period, when we stopped activities, or we were limited our activities in our library. So it will be a way to catch the attention of many children that are now, that they were at home, now are fortunately they're at school, now they started school. So it will be a great thing.
Okay. Look, let's keep the questions coming into the chat, but let's move along, because we'll let our other panelists make their presentations, and we'll come back up for a wrap-up session. So let's see. Alessandra, if you can, yep, you can move off there. So we're going to move on. Our second speaker is Christel Palk, who has been head of the Department of Literature in Foreign Languages at Tallinn Central Library in Estonia since 2014. Prior to this, she worked as a librarian in the library's branch libraries 2009 to 2011 and was actually the head of a branch library from 2011 to 2013. Christel's presentation is titled "No Language is an Island Entire of Itself, Supporting Language Learning in a Public Library." So Christel, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. And I'm just going to share my screen here. So there we go. My presentation will be about the Estonian language and how we've tackled issues that have been left to us by the many occupations that the country has been through. So this first illustration on your screen, I'm sorry, it's not changing the, okay. The first illustration on the screen is by a Finnish illustrator, Minna Sundberg, and it's one of my favorite tools when I'm trying to explain why the Estonian language and the Uralic languages in general are so odd and difficult to learn for those who've grown up speaking an Indo-European language. As you can see, the Indo-European language family is vast. Its family tree includes languages that are some of the most spoken in the world. On the Indo-Iranian side, we have Hindi and Bengali, for example. And on the European side, we've got the current lingua franca, English, but also Spanish, German, Russian, and many others. Now, next, I would like to divert your attention to the tiny bonsai tree that is growing quite independently in the shadow of the massive Indo-European tree. This is the tree of Uralic languages. To the speakers of Indo-European languages, this tree might as well be growing on a different planet with its alien fruits of linguistic nightmares. What makes Uralic languages especially frustrating to learn are the high number of grammatical cases, as many as 27, the extensive use of independent suffixes, and the large vowel inventories. The most well-known and most widely spoken are Hungarian and Finnish. However, the Estonian language is spoken by a little over 1 million people around the world, and thus by only around 5% of Uralic language speakers. The rest of the Uralic languages, for example, the Sami language in northern Scandinavia and the Siberian languages Mari, Komi, Udmurti, and others, are even more rare and in danger of extinction. I will not dwell on the distant history of the Estonian language for too long. Suffice to say that most linguistic scientists have said that the distinctive Estonian language started fully developing sometime around the year 1200 from Proto-Finnic dialects. Throughout the following centuries, the Estonian lands were occupied by many different forces, and there were two periods of occupation that were linguistically the most detrimental. The first of these started in 1881, when Nicholas III ascended to the throne of the Russian Empire. He held strong Russian nationalistic beliefs and started a program of Russification. It started as a mere restructuring of administration processes, but soon turned into a program of almost total Russification. For example, education was given in Russian and street names were changed to Russian names. The main purpose was to create a unified Russian nation without distinct minority languages or nationalities. The second linguistically detrimental period was the Soviet occupation. It started in 1944 and ended in 1991. The horrors of the occupation included, among other things, mass deportations of Estonians, and the prohibition of many important literary works. At the same time, massive amounts of Russian speakers were imported into the country, and the Great Russification program began again. Many occupied nationalities lost their native language, customs, and culture as a result in the Soviet Union. Luckily, the Estonians, mostly thanks to a quiet underground culture of resistance, were able to keep their language, stories, customs, and very importantly, their songs alive. After all, it's the singing revolution that brought the nation back out into the light. What we knew then and know now is that language is vital to self-determination and the preservation of culture. Still, the Russification programs had an effect, and the percentage of native Estonian speakers has kept lowering. The 2011 census showed that only 68.5% of the Estonian population spoke Estonian as a native language. Compared to the previous 2001 census, the amount of Estonian speakers had reduced by 3.8%. The largest minority language was and still is Russian. Estonia is geographically small and situated right next to Russia, the geographically largest country in the world with the 8th most spoken language in the world. In Estonia, the native language is still the majority language, but not by a large margin. Regionally, it is very much a minority language. Tallinn Central Library is the largest public library system in Estonia. We operate in the nation's capital, which is one of the more linguistically diverse cities in the country. According to the city's official website, by the end of 2020, only a little over half of the population were Estonian. For many years, one of the pressing issues in the Estonian society was the so-called nation within a nation phenomenon, where the Russian minority population lived in a completely different information field compared to Estonians, getting their news from the Russian state media. The situation has improved, but not completely, especially among the older Russian generations. At our library, we've tried to combat this. We offer access to local and international media channels and publications, while the local newspapers are offered in both Estonian and Russian. We're also teaching our patrons about critical source evaluation during our various library courses. We actively communicate with the local media and share important and factual information via our social media and websites. As librarians, our weapons in the fight against misinformation in whichever language are facts. We've also developed language programs in our libraries. We started with Estonian language cafes in 2016, and we currently have at least one in each city district. We also want to make sure that the speakers of minority languages have the opportunity to keep speaking their language and to teach it to others. Many of our libraries have language clubs, cafes, and courses for many different languages. And of course, our collections reflect our dedication to learning languages and to giving people a chance to read in their own language. All of our branch libraries have language learning text and workbooks, fiction and nonfiction in Estonian, Russian, English, and in many other minority languages. We also make sure that both our Estonian-speaking patrons and Russian-speaking patrons can enjoy cultural events in their native language. Of course, very important target groups for us are children and teenagers. In Tallinn, we have schools and kindergartens that teach students in Estonian, but we also have ones that offer education in Russian. One way to combat the marginalization of Russian-speaking students in Russian language schools is through the so-called language immersion programs, which have a much nicer term in Estonian, keelekümblus, which translates to language bathing. Libraries can help out. Over the years, we've had many different projects where we bring together Estonian authors and Russian students. In these meetings, the students can practice their Estonian, learn more about the culture, and find Estonian authors and books to read. For teenagers, we've had projects like Speak to Me and Skype Book Club, where groups from local and/or foreign Russian schools met up with groups from Estonian schools, and with the help of a moderator, discussed topics regarding nationality, languages, ethnicity, and belonging. These are just a few examples. There have been various projects and programs for both age groups over the years. And lastly, all citywide reading programs that we organize are always available in both Estonian and Russian, so are most library classes and events. After a few decades of independence with this mixed population of native Estonians and a relatively large minority of Russians, an interesting development has occurred with the help of language bathing programs. The newer generations of ethnic Russians have started seeing themselves as Estonian Russian, not quite as Russian and not quite Estonian. Broadly speaking, the Estonian Russian is younger, speaks both languages fluently, may have parents from both ethnic groups, and considers Estonia to be their homeland. They are more likely to succeed in future studies and in any future career path. They have mastered the navigation of both linguistic and cultural maps. They are an example of how languages shape us and direct us toward new possibilities. They are a success story of embracing and melting languages and cultures and creating something beautiful. Just like the roots of trees in the forests are connected underneath the earth, so are individual languages connected through the everyday actions and experiences of their carriers. Yes, it is important to preserve small languages and to prevent their extinction, but it is also important to accept and encourage the speakers of local minority languages. The more languages we all embrace and speak, the stronger we are together. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. That was excellent. And I've not learned the phrase language bathing before, so I intend to go for a language bath at some point. That was really interesting. Some interesting things came up in that. I'm wondering if there's any questions that we have immediately there. I'm just seeing nothing yet in the chat, but I was very curious. Your census is going to be this year, you said. What's your hunch? Do you think that the percentage is going to rise, or do you have any indication?
Well, we just recently did our library's yearly evaluation, and just looking at the numbers in Tallinn, the capital city, it seems that the number will be lowering even further. The native speakers are either moving to the country, or it's just a matter of Estonians not having as many children anymore. And we are unfortunately losing native language speakers consistently.
Interesting. Look, I'm going to ask one question that's come in and then we'll move on to Elizabeth. So the question for you is, if it's not too political to ask, is there any pushback from Russia itself, encouraging another neighboring nation to speak and read in Russian, visit Russian news sites and absorb Russia's stance on the world must serve, I guess, Russia's purposes quite well? In other words, the question is, do you find resistance to promoting Estonian?
Oh, yes. This is a question that requires a separate webinar. It's a very touchy subject. There are many conspiracy theories regarding meddling by, Russian political forces and trying to promote the idea that that teaching Estonian or doing language bathing programs is somehow repressive, even though I would argue that it cannot be oppressive to give extra tools to students, because the main purpose of these language baiting programs is not to teach Russian children to become Estonian. It's to give them Estonian as well, so they can have both languages. And like I mentioned before, when I said that these Estonian Russian students, they are more successful, I didn't mean that they're simply more successful than only Russian speaking students. They are more successful than Estonian students as well. They will do better in school and better in their work life than either only Estonian speakers or only Russian speakers. So they are the perfect example that the more languages you speak, the more better you will do in the future.
That's great, and that's a very good question, so thank you for that. Okay, look, we're going to move on to our last panelist. I can see a little bit more movement now in the chat. Do let us know where you're from, because we've got sort of over 60 people here and we can't always be from Ireland or Greece or Serbia, so do let us know. Okay, our last speaker is one of my colleagues from Naples. Very happy to have Elisabeth Rundqvist with us from the National Library of Sweden. Elisabeth is chair of Naples Working Group on Regional and Minority Languages. Since 2007, she's held a position as Executive Officer at the National Coordination of Libraries section within the National Library in Sweden. She's a specialist on the Swedish Library Act and public libraries. So she's a special advisor within the field of libraries and national minorities and the Sami indigenous people. And that's what she's going to speak to us about today, that whole experience. So Elisabeth, over to you for the last presentation.
Thank you very much. And I'm sharing my screen and it's on the wrong slide. So I'm going to talk about bridging the past to the future and why national libraries matters for the survival of small languages. And the National Library of Sweden is also the library authority in Sweden. So in the year of 2000, Sweden signed and ratified the European Charter for the Regional and Minority Languages, and by that made a commitment to 5 languages: Swedish, Finnish, Yiddish, Meänkieli, Romani Chib, and the Sami language. The 5 peoples are the Swedish Finns, the Jews, the Tornedalian, Roman, and the Sami people. And the Sami population is also an indigenous people and are present in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and a small part of Russia. And Meänkieli, Romani Chib, and Sami have several varieties or dialects. So this year, the National Library of Sweden have received a new commission from the Swedish government. We have received 10 million Swedish crowns a year for a 3-year period to use for a long time reinforcement of library functions for each of the national minority languages. Today, Sweden have 4 libraries specialized in Swedish, Finnish, Yiddish, Meänkieli, and the Sami languages. Each of these 4 libraries will get new assignments to strengthen the work with support to all public libraries and to reinforce and develop the services to the end users to make the library accessible from all over Sweden. The commission to the National Library also includes a library solution for the Romani Chib. The National Library should conduct hearings with the Roman people, research and suggest a nationwide library function for Romani Chib and the Romans. The level of library services in the public libraries varies between different municipalities, from non-existent to excellent. It is an unacceptable variation between different public libraries. Therefore, a nationwide support is needed. In many cases, the public libraries lack a strategic development plan. We aim to develop support to all public libraries with the intent of building strong, sustainable structures in the local library services for, with, and by national minorities. We also have developed an ebook reading app with books in Romani Chib and Sami languages. The rest of the languages will come later. And the name of the app is Bläddra in Swedish, and translated to English, it would be like swipe or turn the page. And you can see to the right some screenshots from the app. And we are going to release it during the spring. National libraries are bridges to heritage. Public libraries weed and renew collections to be in tune with today's users. National libraries are keepers of cultural heritage for the country. Usually there are no weeding of collections. Over time, the libraries build more and more complete collections. A national library collection is key to historical explanations of suppression, discrimination, and marginalization. Historical records that are painful but absolutely necessary to keep for the future generations to understand their history. The role of the national libraries is bridging the past to the future by unbroken timelines in the collections. Public libraries usually have children and youth as special target groups for reading promotion and support interest in languages. Public libraries gives a first encounter with books, stories, and make a connection to cultural identity. Teenagers need strong support from the public library, as well as from school and family, to develop the next level of language. National libraries are keepers of cultural heritage, as well as a source of more advanced texts, science, and research. There is a huge symbolic value of making texts of minority languages available. There is a need to access a scientific language to be able to develop scholarship, research, and science using the minority language. Otherwise, the language will evaporate with time. Libraries bridging generations as well. How can I understand my grandmother? The same language is important, but not essential. Reading a book together, looking at the pictures, is possible without sharing the same language. By using the library and its collections, it's possible to bridge generations and to build an understanding for the shared cultural context. A curiosity about one's lineage, cultural inheritance, oral traditions, songs, dances, etc., gives a cultural identity to build on. Build pride and a strong belonging to a cultural identity as a child, and the interest for the language will come with time. National libraries and public libraries are equally important to keep small languages and endangered languages alive, thriving, and become stronger. It is just a matter of the stage in a person's life and interest. By giving small languages a natural place in the library and its collections, a better visibility, legitimacy, it becomes an integrated part of the society. When small languages get enough positive attention, it becomes easier for the speakers to make the language an asset instead of a burden. The Swedish Arts Council have elected a Romani reading promotion ambassador. His name is Bagir Kviek, and that inspires the Roman children to read. Some of the smallest languages actually may already have been lost. It is just small pockets of speakers, not enough to keep developing the language. Words for new phenomena is lacking. There is no words for scroll, swipe, app, etc. There are not enough teaching and text to bring the language to an adult level. The language never reached a level of a working language. Other languages have to substitute in more advanced thoughts and messages. Some languages have a high influx of the majority language. Historical text becomes obsolete, just the source material for linguists and researchers. And the COVID-19 disease is devastating. We are losing speakers. A rapid loss of speakers due to old age leaves an emptiness. Fluent speakers bridging generations are passing away. Natural places connecting the language and the culture are fewer due to self-isolation. Traditional customs are disappearing and the connections are lost. Some languages are strongly territorial, and when people move out of traditional areas, they lose connection to other speakers. Also, we speak about the lost generations, persons with a double guilt. The guilt of not passing the language to the next generation, and the guilt of speaking a language considered unwanted. Not using the language with the children, they have broken the line of passing down the minority language to their children. COVID-19 have a huge impact. Activities have been cancelled and elderly people have passed away due to the infection. Irreplaceable speakers are lost. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You've raised a number of things I want to follow up on there, but we've also got some more good comments and questions that I think that have come in. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions for you. And I think the first one that came in just in order was actually in the chat from Rachel, which was a question really, maybe it's a sort of general in some ways, but it's how minority does a language have to be to fall into the category of small languages?
In a number of speakers, I guess the question is, it doesn't really say in the charter. It's more like the country itself appoint the language and make a commitment or make the language counted in the list. So it depends on different countries how small the language is.
Yeah, and I was just, once that question came in, I was just having a quick look online at the signatory countries of the Charter, because I noted we've got Irish colleagues on the call, and just to see, you know, if the extent to which Ireland was involved. And I think it very much is the definition, isn't it? The signing member state will make the definition. Mm. Okay, so look, let's take a question from Arjun here. Given the fact that any national library is the custodian of a nation's socio-cultural heritage, does the National Library of Sweden have any sort of online program or online initiatives that help to further the agenda of intercultural and interlinguistic integration in Sweden?
We have one project going on right now. It's called the Sami Audiovisual Collection, and it's not ready for the audience yet, but it's about the movies or old films that is telling the story about the Sami people. The Sami is an indigenous people, so they have drawn attention to it during all the time we have been able to record films. So they appear in films, but usually the metadata doesn't really point it out. So you have to search the collections for it. And sometimes it's a very humiliating picture of the Sami people, discriminating and calling them names that we don't use today. So it's a sensitive material, and we have an ongoing discussion about how much will be accessible for just anyone on internet and how much should be more like digital repatriation to the Sami people themselves, and they have to control how much that is going to be shared with people outside the Sami community. And we haven't reached a conclusion about that, but it's a difficult question about it.
That's interesting.
When it comes to putting things online to encourage to learn the language, it's the app I mentioned, the reading app.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is we have built the app. It's almost done, but we don't have enough books in it yet. So we're not going to release it until we have more books. But the problem with that is we don't have any ebooks in these languages. It's really difficult to find books in the minority languages because it's not printed very much books either. And an ebook market is non-existent. So we try to create it now by encourage the publishers to transform their printed books into ebooks. So we have to give support by providing a way of doing the EPUB file format so we can show it in the app. But the app is a bit different from other library apps because you don't need to have a library card, or you don't have to be signed in to a specific library. The app is direct to the end users. You just download it and start to use it. You can use it inside Sweden, you can't use it outside, but except for that, you don't have to make it an account, you don't have to have a library card, you just read.
Elizabeth, there is a question, I think, just to follow up on that whilst you're on the subject, from Tamara. The app for Romani language, is it in open access, she asks. Tamara and colleagues coordinated a digitization project of publications in Romani in 2006 with CENEL members and TEL, the European Library. Unfortunately, it was not a big success, meaning Roma people didn't use it. So just, is it available for others to take and use in that open access sense?
We haven't discussed really that part of the project yet. We have used the ebook reader is an open source, and then we created the app surrounding it. And I guess I have my colleague Karin Granvall here. She might fill me out, but most of the services we do is open source. Our union catalog, for instance, is open source, and all the metadata is open source. So it might be possible to make the reading app as well, but I don't have the knowledge about it.
Okay, we can probably, I think all of our email addresses are found quite easily also through the NAPOL website. So tomorrow we can probably follow that up. Now we have only a couple of minutes left. There's an absolute blockbuster of a question that's in the chat. I don't know if the panelists can see it, which I'm not certain we're going to answer in a couple of minutes, but I'll put it up. Is there a hierarchy in minority languages, e.g. a native language that has been displaced by a language versus a more recent settler group's language? And should we be on our guard for nationalist politics favouring the former over the latter? I certainly suspect that's location specific, lots of contextual conditions. If a panelist does have any thoughts on that, you can reveal yourself via camera and take it on. Definitely the sort of question you like to get at sort of 1 minute from the end of a webinar on a Friday afternoon.
I can start from the Swedish point of view. So
you're going to have to make it very quick though, Elizabeth. So let's.
Yeah, and Kristella and Alexandra could join in. In Sweden, there is no hierarchy between the 5 languages. They are equal to each other. But we do have a problem with like immigrant languages taking over the attention at the libraries.
So I think there's probably room for some more discussion around that. Look, I'm conscious of time. I just wonder if our panelists could reveal themselves from reveal their video so that we can all see each other one sort of last time there. And Roly, I don't know if you're there, but I just want to say, I mean, it is 4 o'clock now. We're recording this, so we like to keep these on the hour. I think these presentations have been fantastic, to be honest. There's loads of stuff I've been writing down. There's a lot more questions here. Roly, we may have to revisit this in future. It looks like this is fertile ground.
It is.
I don't know if you've got few comments to say at the end, Roly.
Just to thank everyone. That was such an illuminating set of presentations. And as you say, Stuart, it feels like every contribution opened 2 or 3 other doors, which will lead us to other sessions, I think, in the future. So thank you all. Okay, well, we also managed to get a few countries represented in the chat by the end. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks very much to our panelists. Yep, have a great weekend. See you all soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.